for that. Okay, so he goes on further in chapter 14 and he says, the preaching of the Apostle Peter in Rome. He says, the evil power who hates all that is good and plots against the salvation of men constituted Simon at that time the father and author of such wickedness, as if to make him a mighty antagonist of the great and inspired apostles of our Savior. For that divine and celestial grace, which cooperates with its ministers, by their appearance and presence quickly extinguished the kindled fame of evil, and humbled and cast down through them every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of God, according to 2 Corinthians 10:5. Wherefore, neither the conspiracy of Simon nor that of any of the others who rose at that period could accomplish anything in those apostolic times, for everything was conquered and subdued by the splendor of the truth and by the divine word itself, which had but lately begun to shine from heaven upon men, which was then flourishing upon earth and dwelling in the apostles themselves. Goes on further and he says, immediately the above mentioned impostor was smitten in the eyes of his mind by a divine and miraculous flash, and after the evil deeds done by him had been first detected by the Apostle Peter in Judea, he fled and made a great journey across the sea from the east to the west, thinking that only thus could he live according to his mind. Coming to the city of Rome by the mighty corporation of that power which was lying in wait there, he was in a short time so successful in his undertaking that those who dwelled there honored him as a god by the erection of a statue. Wow, that's amazing. So that means even the Senate of Rome approved Simon then, because previously we saw in the account of Tertullian that no one will be regarded as a god in the city of Rome or by the Romans except the Senate sit down and approve of it. So I believe even he has gotten the senators hooked by his magic as well, and that means they gave it the approval of him as a god, wherefore resulting to the erection of his statue in the city of Rome that he was a god. That's amazing. Such level of deception carried out by Simon Magus. Okay, so furthermore, Eusebius said, but this did not last long, for immediately during the reign of Claudius, the all-good and gracious providence, which watch over all things, led Peter, that strongest and greatest of the apostles, and the one who on account of his virtue was the speaker for all the others, to Rome against the great corrupter of life, clad in divine armor like a noble commander of God. He carried the costly merchandise of the light of the understanding from the east to those who dwelled in the west, proclaiming the light itself and the word which brings salvation to souls, and the preaching of the kingdom of heaven. This account that occurred between Simon Peter and Simon Magus will see in details as promised in the clip where we will bring to you from the writings of Clement. He recorded the conversation and the exchange that they had in the city of Rome. But we talked about it briefly already from our previous clip, where you will see the teaching of Simon Peter in Rome. Okay, so you can dive into that to see that briefly there, where Apostle Peter countered the teaching of Simon and where he exposed his foolishness and even led to the resurrection of a dead person as well. And he countered his acts that he was using to deceive people. And of course, he was led to shame as well. So we go on further to see concerning other accounts recorded by Eusebius. He goes on in chapter 20, and he talks about the event which took place in Jerusalem during the reign of Nero. And he says, Josephus again in the 20th book of his Antiquity relates the quarrel which rose among the priests during the reign of Nero, while Felix was the procurator of Judea. His words are as follows. There arose a quarrel between the high priest, on the other hand, and the priests and leaders of the people of Jerusalem on the other, and each of them collected the body of the boldest and most restless men and put himself at their head. And whenever they met, they hurled invectives or abuses and stones at each other, and there was no one that would interpose. But these things were done at will, as if in a city destitute of a ruler. So great was the shamelessness and the audacity of the high priest that they dared to send their servants to the threshing floors to seize the tithe due to the priest. And thus, those of the priests that were poor were seen to be perishing of want. In this way did the violence of the factions prevail over all justice. What kinds of priests are these? These are wicked high priests in positions of power. And even with all the violence that was going on, these people were only thinking about tithe. They were thinking about the collections that were being given to the high priest in the temple. What a shame. What a shame indeed. So, furthermore, concerning these accounts, Josephus records, and he says, and the same author again relates that about the same time there sprang up in Jerusalem a certain kind of robbers, who by day, as he says, and in the middle of the city, slew those who met them. For especially at the feast they mingle with the multitude, and with short swords, which they concealed under their garments, they stabbed the most distinguished men. And when they fell, the murderers themselves were among those who expressed their indignation. What kinds of people are these? And thus, on account of the confidence which was reimbursed in them by all, they remained undiscovered. Wow, what an event. The first that was slain by them was Jonathan the high priest, and after him many were killed every day, until the fear became worse than the evil itself, each one, as in battle, hourly expecting death. What a terrible moment to live in this time, and the various wickedness that was occurring in Jerusalem. That's terrible. So Eusebius went on further, and he said in chapter 23, Paul, having been sent bound from Judea to Rome, made his defense and was acquitted of every charges. So we go further to see what happened with Apostle Paul. And he said, Festus was sent by Nero to be Felix's successor. Under him, Paul, having made his defense, was sent bound to Rome. Aristarchus was with him, whom he also somewhere in his epistle quite naturally called his fellow prisoner in Colossians chapter 4 from verse 10. And Luke, who wrote the Acts of the Apostles, brought his history to a close at this point, after stating that Paul spent 2 whole years at Rome as a prisoner at large and preached the word of God without restraint. Thus, after he made his defense, or he had made his defense, it is said that the apostle was sent again upon the ministry of preaching, and that upon coming to the same city a second time, he suffered martyrdom. And in this imprisonment, he wrote his second epistles to Timothy, in which he mentioned his first defense and his impending death. Wow. So this is how Paul died. He left the city of Rome, and then later he came back again, and that was when he died. Okay. So concerning Paul, he went on further to say, but hear his testimony on these matters. At my first answer, he says, no man stood with me, but all men forsook me. I pray God that it may not be laid to their charge. Notwithstanding, the Lord stood with me and strengthened me, that by me the preaching might be fully known, and that all the Gentiles might hear. And I was delivered out of the mouth of the lion, according to 2 Timothy 4, from verse 16 to 17. It plainly indicates in these words that on the former occasion, in order that the preaching might be fully fulfilled by him, he was rescued from the mouth of the lion, referring in this expression to Nero, as is probable on account of the letter's cruelty. He did not therefore afterward add the similar statement, he will rescue me from the mouth of the lion. for he saw in the spirit that his end will not be long delayed. Furthermore, he says, wherefore he adds to the words, and he delivered me from the mouth of the lion. And this sentence, the Lord delivered me from every evil work and will preserve me unto his heavenly kingdom, according to 2 Timothy 4:18, indicating his speedy martyrdom, which he also foretell still more clearly in the same epistles when he writes, for I am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. In his second epistle to Timothy, moreover, indicates that Luke was with him when he wrote, but at his first defense, not even he. Hence, it is probable that Luke wrote the Acts of the Apostles at that time, continuing his history down to the period when he was with Paul. Okay? So, furthermore, on Paul's defense, he says, but these things have been adduced by us to show that Paul's martyrdom did not take place at the time of that Roman sojourn which Luke records. It is probable, indeed, that as Nero was more disposed to meekness in the beginning, Paul's defense of his doctrine was more easily received, but that when he had advanced to the commission of lawless deeds of daring, he made the apostles as well as others the subject of his attack. Okay, so this is what led the event that occurred that led to the martyrdom of Apostle Paul. So, furthermore, in chapter 25, concerning the persecution under Nero, in which Paul and Peter were honored at Rome with martyrdom in behalf of the religion, talking about Christianity now. So he gives this account and he says, when the government of Nero was now firmly established, he began to plunge into unholy pursuit and armed himself even against the religion of the God of the universe. Talking about the belief of the God of the universe now. Okay, to describe the greatness of his depravity does not lie within the plane of the present work, as there are many indeed that have recorded his history in most accurate narrative. Everyone may at his pleasure learn from them the coarseness of the man's extraordinary madness, under the influence of which, after he had accomplished the destruction of so many myriads without any reason, he ran into such blood guiltiness that he did not spare even his nearest relative and dearest friends, but destroyed his mother, his brothers, and his wife, with very many others of his own family, as he would private and public enemies with various kinds of death. What a wicked fellow. So it goes on further speaking about Nero, and he says, but with all these things, this particular in the catalogue of his crimes was still wanting, that he was the first of the emperors who showed himself an enemy of the divine religion or belief. The Roman Tertullian is likewise a weakness of this. He writes as follows: examine your records. There you will find that Nero was the first that persecuted this doctrine, particularly then when, after subduing all the East, he exercised his cruelty against all at Rome. Wow, even in his own home country, he was very cruel as well. We glory in having such a man, the leader in our punishment, for whoever knows him can understand that nothing was condemned by Nero unless it was something of great excellence. What a man inspired by demons! He only went after things that were of great excellence, and he destroyed them. He even killed his own mother, his brother, and even his own relatives. What's a wicked fellow, inspired by devils. Wow, you can imagine who was in charge of the demonic in Rome at that time. Terrible, terrible record. Let's go on further to see what he revealed to us. Thus, publicly announcing himself as the first among God's chief enemies, he was led on to the slaughter of the apostles. It is therefore recorded that Paul was beheaded in Rome itself, and that Peter likewise was crucified under Nero. This account of Peter and Paul is substantiated by the fact that their names are preserved in the cemeteries of that place, even to the present day. That means even to the very present time of Eusebius, the names of Apostle Paul and Apostle Peter were on the cemetery in the very place where Nero killed them. That is amazing. That is amazing, and such a terrible record on Nero, inspired by demons. It is confirmed likewise by Caius, a member of the church, who arose under Zephyrinus, the bishop of Rome. He, in a published disputation with Proclus, the leader of Phrygian heresy, speaks as follows concerning the places where the sacred corpses of the aforesaid apostles were laid. But I can show the trophies of the apostles, for if you will go to the Vatican or to the Augustinian way, you will find the trophies of those who laid the foundation of this church. Now, that is even the present Vatican where it is today in history. That is where Paul and Apostle Peter were killed, which we call Vatican today as well. Okay? So furthermore, concerning this, Eusebius says, and that they both suffered martyrdom at the same time is stated by Dionysius, Bishop of Corinth, in his epistles to the Romans, in the following words: you have thus, by such an admonition, bound together the planting of Peter and of Paul at Rome and Corinth. For both of them planted and likewise taught us in our Corinth, and they taught together in like manner in Italy, and suffered martyrdom at the same time. I have quoted these things in order that the truth of the history might be still more confirmed. Okay, so he also draws accounts to reference the writings of Dionysius, the bishop of Corinth as well, who corresponds with other historical accounts about the death of Apostle Paul and Peter, how they suffered martyrdom in Rome, in that place called Vatican as well. And he recounts that both of them also taught both in Rome and in Corinth as well. And they suffered the same fate in Italy as well. Okay? This is the conscious being.